Hi, and welcome to Hand in Hand's first podcast. Today, we're exploring how to stay sane when our kids are driving us mad. What are the best practical strategies available that parents of neurodiverse children can employ to try to develop a healthier, more balanced sense of emotional wellness when life at home is really stressful and challenging? I'm Laura Moore, and I look after the families that approach us for support through Hand in Hand, a social care organisation that provides support to families with neurodiverse children. I also have two of my own children who are neurodiverse, so I have plenty of first-hand experience of what it's like to feel constantly stressed, pushed to my limit, burnt out, and full of guilt. For all of us, there are times when parenting is hard, but being the parent of a neurodiverse child can take this to another level. Almost every week, I'm meeting families that are describing similar scenarios at home where their child is having meltdowns, they can't be reasoned with, they can't calm down when they become dysregulated, they're on the go from the crack of dawn without having slept through the night, they're hurting their siblings, they're defiant, and the impact this is having on home life is just huge. Today, I've invited two experienced therapists from our community to help us hone in on what we can practically do to help ourselves stay calm and feel better about ourselves and our situation. Please welcome Zehava Handler and Zisi Schleider.
Hi, I'm Zehava Handler. I am a psychotherapist working mainly with adults. My specialization is sleep and everything that is to do with sleep, or rather not sleeping, and everything that comes along with it, whether it is anxiety, trauma, relationship issues.
Lovely. And Zisi?
Hi, I am Zisi Schleider. I am a child and adolescent integrative psychotherapist, which means that I work with children, adolescents, but sometimes that involves adults too, because as I often explain, an adult is a mixture of a child and an adolescent together. So sometimes it's about helping mothers, sometimes it's about working directly with a young person or the younger child. But we're here to make a difference and support those that we can, especially in our community.
Brilliant. Well, thank you so much for joining me today. I think I'd like us to begin by taking a look at an imaginary scenario, which isn't really imaginary. It's the story of our families at Hand in Hand. Not one family or one child, but a collection of some of the things that I've heard during my time at Hand in Hand. Okay, let's picture it. It's Friday night, and Malki has worked hard to make a beautiful Shabbos for her family. Her recently widowed mother-in-law is joining them this week. She lights the Shabbos candles, and a sense of dread descends on her. There will be no device for Shlomi to use to keep himself occupied over the next 25 hours. She feels like she's walking on eggshells, trying to prevent the slightest thing which could send her 11-year-old son into a meltdown. Friday nights are always challenging. She mustn't say the wrong thing or do anything to annoy him. He doesn't go to shul with her husband. They tried to make that work for a long time, but it wasn't worth it. Chaim couldn't daven properly while Shlomi wandered around the shul. Shlomi said he was just having movement breaks like they encourage him to do in school, but Chaim said it disturbed people and it was embarrassing. Malki thinks he's thrown away the chance to be a frum yid, and her husband should have tried harder to make that work. Chaim comes home from shul and starts to sing Shalom Aleichem. The children join in and harmonize beautifully. They know not to sing too loudly because it hurts Shlomi's ears. But Shlomi's feeling sensitive right now, and because he's noticed his brother Binyamin has touched his Lego display and it hasn't been put back correctly. Suddenly, Shlomi lunges at Binyamin and squeezes his neck tightly. And suddenly the crockery is pushed off the table and plates smash on the floor. Instantly, he's ashamed of himself. He sees the horrified look on his grandmother's face. He runs out of the house to no particular destination, just away from the pressure to sit and the pressure to do and the pressure to be a certain way that he just can't be. Malki busies herself with the clear up. She can't look at her mother-in-law. Chaim shouts at the children to help their mother. He's shocked that Shlomi would leave the house like that. Normally he would run up to his bedroom, but now he's goodness knows where, and it's dark and it's late, and I'll go to look for him, says Chaim, as he puts his coat back on. Malki hides in the kitchen and wipes hot tears away. She hates that her mother-in-law has witnessed this. She debates whether to feed the children their supper now or wait to see if Chaim comes back with Shlomi. She wonders what it must be like for normal families to be able to sit down to a normal Friday night dinner where children chat and laugh and sing Zmiras, say Divrei Torah and bask in the glow of Shabbos.
Wow, that really touched me. I can hear the sadness, the inability to understand where to go, what to do next, how to cope. And maybe most glaring of all is a sense of a lost dream somehow. Things haven't turned out the way we thought they would.
Yeah. There's so much disappointment, so much pressure, so much intensity of feelings, so much shame. There's so much, Laura, in that little sort of vignette. It's got so much in there to really think about.
It does. And you wouldn't believe at our support sessions, we run an ASD support group on a monthly basis. And during these sessions, we hear this story over and over. Shabbos is hard. There's so many triggers. There's no devices available. The regular things that our neurodiverse children would be busy with are not available to them, and things are explosive in the home.
I think that Shabbos brings an element to moms in particular that is very different to the rest of the week. There's times that, people are at work, people are in school. There's things that are supposed to happen. And Shabbos creates a space where for those who are working and in school, they're at home. But both parents, but mums in particular, are sort of on duty even more on Shabbos, trying to get everything done, trying to make sure people are happy, trying to get the family relationships together. So actually, rather than it being the weekend and you're off duty, in a way you're even more on duty after a very tiring week.
So true.
Okay, so if we think about this Shlomi or all the Shlomis that are out there, whatever their name may or may not be, and we think about how we can understand them and where they're coming from, even before Zehava we get to the acceptance. Because how can we accept when we don't even understand? And maybe if we look at children who struggle with autism or ASD on a lesser level, or don't have any diagnosis, but just struggle. And we think about the fact that what it's like for them in their experience, whether they struggle with food, texture of food and eating, and what that happens when they're given food they don't like, whether it's clothes that are uncomfortable for them to wear, and just how hard it can be for them on a daily basis. So let's think about it from our perspective. We're starting to have some beautiful weather and we sit outside in our back garden and we fall asleep and we get badly sunburnt. And then we pick up a shirt that just came out the washing machine and it's dry and it's hard, it hasn't had that dry softness to it. And you put that on and the agony of what that might feel like on your sunburn, just how painful that might be, might give us a little bit of an understanding of what it might feel like for a child struggling with any sort of sensory issue. And you can take that example, whether it's with food or a child with allergies. Imagine if you're allergic, mildly allergic to some form of a nut, and you keep on eating it, or you'll keep on given it, and it keeps on irritating you. So either we have to say, right, let's avoid this, or we have to have antihistamine available at all times to manage it. But when we keep on doing the same things and get stuck on it, it's really complex. And maybe one other way of thinking about it would be a very interesting fact. I think it's Dr. Pelkovitz that says this, but 98% of our world experience around us, we cut out. We only can hone in on 2% at a time. So how many cars hooted as we walked down the street? How many babies cried? How many red cars? How many, whatever it might be, we don't notice these things. We only focus in on that 2%. But children who are sensory or children struggling with autism, those children cannot block out the 98%. Now, how overwhelming, how challenging is that? And when we start to understand Shlomi in this story, in this fictitious story, and how so his brother touched his Lego. But actually, Shlomi can't block out in the same way that we can block out the irritating noise, the flashing light, the misplaced Lego piece. He can't do that. He doesn't have that capacity. So when we start to have that compassion for Shlomi, just gives us a little bit of a sense and a taster of what he's going through. So you've got two things. There's shame, which is I am bad, and there's guilt, which is I did something wrong. Now, in this Malki, in this story, where was Malki?
She was hiding in the kitchen.
So, but she was I am bad. It wasn't about feeling guilty. It wasn't about feeling upset. It was about real deep shame. And maybe what we need to think a little bit about for each of us, we all walk around with shame. We all have this, particularly when we have a child that struggles, especially in a community where everything looks so picture perfect, everything looks so wonderful, and everyone's matching. And all of a sudden, we have this child that's running around the shul. And what's daddy supposed to do? A child that is creating chaos. We can't invite guests to our home. We can't invite family to our home. Where our whole lives are put on hold because of the struggle we're experiencing. So at the end of the day, the deep-rootedness, if we go back to that concept of understanding or accepting, were we to be able to think a little bit about really deeply understanding our child, accepting their struggles, that sunburn, that struggle of difficulty, that allergy that they've got, and to think, how could we talk to the family, extended family members, even though sometimes they're receptive and sometimes they're not, we can be okay with certain things. We can say, I think I can be okay with this. I can look at my mother-in-law and shrug, because actually we have choices, and sometimes we're just too run down to allow those choices to step in.
Yeah, and the way that we approach things influences the way our children feel about those things. But I'm wondering, and why actually do we have to feel any shame at all? Is there any? Have I? Is it my fault that my child has neurodiversity? Is it something I've done?
Well, there's a very interesting idea here, because we have loads of emotions in us, and we could say that all the emotions have good in them, but they can lead to not good if we have too much of it. So we're talking about shame. Some shame is really good and healthy shame. For example, if I said something that was insensitive and I hurt my friend, I feel so ashamed of what I did. I did something wrong. And what's good about that shame is I might phone my friend and really apologize. And also I will absorb it and I will learn from it to do better. But when I take my shame to an extent that is unhealthy, it's going to start making me worry about what I do in relation to what others are going to think of me, rather than what I'm doing in relation to what I think is morally right for me. And that's going to stop me from behaving the way that might be more natural and better for me
and beneficial for your
around.
children and family in general.
So I would argue that to be in a place of shame is not a good place. To be able to transfer shame into guilt and then to make that phone call from a position of I've done something I shouldn't have done, no longer is I am bad. As long as shame is I am. If you ever think of any shameful comment, it's always an I am. So if we're saying I am, there's nothing to talk about. There's nothing to do. But when we're recognizing I did, or there was a part of me that responded, that's where we can work with it. So I'm just separating the shame and the guilt in my head, because that way it's a bit easier for people to be able to say to themselves whether I am something or whether I did something. And I am message, we actually need to get help for that. When I am bad, we give up, we lie down, we roll over, it's done. In order to be able to do something helpful with that shame, we need to make it into something which I feel bad about. I feel bad that I said something to my friend, I'm going to call up and apologize. If I am bad, there's nothing, I can't even do anything because it's
overwhelming.
Bad. It's overwhelming and it's over. So we want to be able to recognize within ourselves when we're giving ourselves an I am message of hiding in the kitchen, of so embarrassed I can't look at my mother-in-law because I am such a bad mother. Look at my home, look at what's going on, versus the idea that there's something which is really struggling and difficult. I am so embarrassed right now about what's happened. But you know what? I know my child struggles. We're doing the best we can. Hashem's given me this child for this reason in this moment.
Exactly right, Zisi. There are situations where, like we said, if you feel that moment of shame, you can translate it into something positive by moving it into the guilt and moving it into the repair. But if the shame is the basis of I'm a failure, what are other people thinking of me? Malki is running away to the kitchen as though she did something wrong. But all Malki did in the story is light candles, set a beautiful table, prepare food, and try and negotiate around all her children to accommodate the whole family. So what does she have to be guilty about? Absolutely nothing. She's done right. And therefore, the shame is misplaced. The shame is, what is my mother-in-law going to think about her daughter-in-law who has such a busy, crazy household? What are people in shul going to say when my son is running around and not sitting nicely and davening?
Or not there.
Or isn't there at all? What is that going to say about his Yiddishkeit?
How does that reflect on me and my parenting?
How does it reflect on my own Yiddishkeit? How does it reflect on who I am within this community? What are my other children feeling about their sibling?
And am I losing sight in all of this about what we're actually here for and what our role is as parents? And if I can give the example of Pinchas Scheinberg, he quotes the idea that why do we have children when we're so young, when we're 18, 20, young, and we have these challenging children that we don't know what to do with? Why don't we have them when we're 50, 60? Hashem could have made it that we have all the koichos we need at that age to really be that developed, mature parenting,
Right,
so
when
to speak.
we've got the seichel that life has given us by that point.
Yes, and we can get it right.
Exactly.
And his answer is always just touches me every time, is that the reason Hashem gives us children when we're young is because they're there for our opportunity of growth. And if we don't use the children and the challenges that our children come with for us to manage today, Hashem will test us in other ways. We're here in this world to grow. We're here to develop. And it's so challenging. It's so challenging. But sometimes just having that idea in the back of your mind that this is here for your growth. Sometimes.
To embrace it and to go with it and to try to learn from it and just actualize our potential.
Zisi, what you just said makes me think about that famous children's book, We're Going on a Bear Hunt. Seems like such a peculiar book when you're first reading it to your kids. But if we think about the challenges that the whole family is facing together, they can't go over, they can't go under, they have to go through in order to reach the next step. And that's really what you're saying, that we need to, all of us together as a family, but also as individuals, we need to go through to reach the other side. And that is what makes us better, stronger, more fulfilled. So even in the moment when it feels so difficult and so impossible, if we can just retain the feeling, I am okay. I am doing okay. This is the best I can do right now. That helps us get through.
And is there any practical strategy that you can suggest at that moment that would help us at that point?
So I was just going to say on just that what you've just done are positive affirmations. And if each person sort of writes for themselves, does it with a friend, their spouse, some things that really talk to them. So I've got one of my favorite ones that I like. Well, actually, I'll give you two. One of them is that when I'm faced with a really challenging situation, let's just imagine it's my Shlomi in my house, and he's, let's say, doing something which is really challenging for me, then maybe what the first thing I'll say to myself in order to stay the adult and stay in place will be, it is not about me. This is about Shlomi, his journey, his experience. It's not about me. And another thing that I might say to myself if I'm feeling really run down and I'm feeling that I don't have that koyach, I might tell myself that I still want to remain that adult. So I might say to myself, I'm not a mat, I matter. And then I'll just say that in my head. Now that's just something that works for me. But we can all find our little sayings or cliches that we can use on what you're saying, Zehava, that we can create that positive affirmation. And I put it on my fridge, and I might have it going up an alarm on my phone, that I can constantly remind myself of that to support myself.
Lovely
Because looking
idea.
after ourselves is just so crucial in order that we've got that ability to remain adult.
I like that, and I like the fact that it's so personal to you. I think that whatever it is that we have to say to ourselves, it should be personal and it should be based on our own personality. Finding something that just has meaning for yourself. I particularly like the first one with the idea that we just have to remember when a child is having a meltdown, the child is expressing something that's going on inside them. It's not about what I did and what I said. It's about what they are experiencing in the moment. And my position as their parent is to be empathetic and to just understand and reach out to help them, not to be defensive because I'm feeling guilty. Again, shame. It's about what the child needs in that moment.
What you're saying is something I'm so passionate about, because when we can hold in mind that all behavior is for a reason, and we don't, not adults, not children, and we do it automatically with a 3-year-old who has a temper tantrum, we say, oh, are they tired? Are they hungry? We don't say, oh my goodness, I'm under attack, I'm going to do something back to them. But when it comes to a 12-year-old or an 11-year-old or our Shlomi in today's story, we immediately go into shame and we go into personal failure, and we're not able to remember that it's not about me. So actually holding on to the idea that all behavior is for a reason and what is behind the behavior that the child is communicating.
So that brings me to 2 thoughts of simple strategies that people can put into place that might help them, because it can be in the moment when in our story Shlomi's run out, Chaim's really afraid and wants to go and find him on the street, mother-in-law is looking on in shock, and the crockery's all over the floor, never mind the other children.
And the danger of the broken plates.
Yes. So in that moment, how do I come to myself to be able to say, this is not about me, or to be able to say that sentence of affirmation? I need to ground myself. There are lots of different ways that people can ground themselves. And again, this can be very personal. One of my favorite ones, I think it's quite easy to do, is put your feet firmly on the ground. Can you do it, Laura?
Yeah, doing it right now.
Put your feet firmly on the ground. Now, focus on feeling the ground pushing up under the palm of your foot. So your foot is pressing down into the ground, and the ground is holding it, supporting it. Sometimes taking your shoes off is really helpful, and you're just kind of feeling that pressure of the earth against your feet. You are in place. You are here. You are okay. How does that feel, Laura?
Very comfortable, actually. I've just enjoyed that feeling that any other thought has kind of flown from my head, and I'm just focusing on the pressure of the ground on my heels, and just that slight pressure feels really nice.
And it just takes a split second, a moment. And then once you've done that, you can then move into the things that work for you personally, like Zisi said.
And there's something really important about that, because actually, in order to be able to utilize any of the suggestions, whether it's the positive affirmations, the ideas, and any techniques, and I've got another technique that from what you've said that just popped into my head as well, anything that we don't do on a regular basis, when it comes to a moment of panic, it's not there. So if we imagine that taxi outside, the plane's about to go, and there's traffic all the way up to Heathrow. And at that moment now, I know that I'm frozen and I'm stuck and I can't do anything. Now, at that moment, I'm not going to think back to the podcast that I heard from Hand in Hand and, oh yeah, that was that. Now, let me try that out. No, not going to happen. But if we practice these techniques on a regular basis, on a regular day, when we need them, they are at our fingertips. They're there to support us. So another one which builds on what you've just suggested, which can be really useful, is using our senses to bring ourselves back into the present moment. So again, it's useful if both feet are on the floor, but just right here and right now, 5 things that you can see right now. Go for it. Anything that you can see.
Curtains, children's toys, chairs, handbag, pen.
4 things that you can touch right now.
Table, skirt, computer, cupboard.
3 things that you can hear.
Hum of the computer, silence in the street, the voice of my colleagues.
2 things that you can smell.
A cream that I applied last night and the softener in my cardigan.
And 1 thing that you can taste, or the last thing that you did taste, or something that you want to taste.
Pleasant taste in my mouth. Nothing in particular, just nothing.
And a deep breath, just in the nose and out through the mouth. And where are you right now?
Feeling very chilled, actually.
This is beautiful. And that 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, using your senses, again, it's something that you build and you do on a regular basis. It will be there to support you in that moment. And it can take 30 seconds to do. So there's so many ways, like you're suggesting, of doing things just to bring us back into the here and now to be able to manage.
Could we talk a little bit about the fact that investing in ourselves is an investment into our children and family, because that investment and that benefit trickles down to them as well?
So my first response to that would be one of my favorite quotes that I hold in mind a lot. And that is that self-care isn't about bubble baths and hot chocolate cake. It's about a lifestyle that we're comfortable with. And yes, sometimes that involves hot chocolate cake and bubble baths. And yes, we do have a really struggling Shlomi and other children at home that are also struggling because of that Shlomi. But at the same time, what's so important to hold on to is about how we technically set ourselves up, what we can do for ourselves, what our choices are, and what can we let go of, how can we make our lives manageable.
Why do we feel so guilty about allowing us that time during the day, or going to that place of an evening, or paying for that therapy? Why should we feel so guilty investing in ourselves?
And we're back to the shame, aren't we? And we're back to that harsh inner critic that we all walk around with, that voice that really beats us up, that cognitive distortion that gives us such a rough time. And that's where your positive affirmations come in so powerful, when we start to hear just how negatively we're speaking to ourselves. And sometimes we do need outside support, whether it's a friend, whether it's a mentor, whether it's a therapist.
How can we silence that inner critic?
We don't want to silence it. We want to hear it, and we want to allow compassion. In the same way as our Shlomi needs compassion, that we can start to get that sense of how agonizing putting that shirt on top of that sunburn is. We need the self-compassion to think about, what am I facing? How am I supporting myself? How am I supporting my husband? Is he supporting me? Who's supporting him? How are we managing this together?
So I want to be able to come back and say to that inner critic, I want to be able to have a conversation with that inner critic, a rational, reasonable conversation.
Sometimes it could be hard to do on your own.
You know, when you go on a plane and we get our safety instructions, one of the things we're told is that if an oxygen mask falls, first put it on yourself before you help somebody with
example.
you.
Yeah.
Now, what's the reason? It's a very simple reason. Most people will have approximately 30 seconds before they start passing out from lack of oxygen. And the child that's sitting next to me, if I were to put the mask on the child first, the child would be fine. By the time it comes to me putting a mask on myself, I will not be able to do it, and my child will not be able to put it on me. And therefore, I am more likely to die. Now, if I were to put the mask on myself first, might be that my child starts being unwell by the time I get to them. But I will get to them as quickly as possible, and then I will be able to take care of them, because I've taken care of myself first, and possibly the stranger who's sitting next to me. And like this, we're going to survive. So if I'm able to self-care, and exactly as Zisi said, we are not talking bubble baths and hot chocolate cake. We are talking about making lifestyle choices that suit us, and that we're flexible with those lifestyle choices. Because first of all, they're very individual, and second of all, our needs change as our life changes.
So true.
So if we can take a moment for that, we are going to be so much more able to help those around us. But if we allow ourselves to be forgotten, we won't be able to be there for those that we love and that we want to be there for. So I think that the difficulty is that It's sort of a cultural norm to think about ourselves means we're selfish. And there's a mistake. There's a huge difference between self-care and selfish.
Yeah. And I'm thinking about a conversation that we've had a previous where you were talking about letting go. And what can we all know in our individual lives what we can and what we can't let go of. And there are things that we will just not compromise on ever. And that's okay. That's okay. But there are things we can, and what might work for one won't be for another.
Exactly.
And if you're listening to this podcast today and you're feeling it's not a good day, turn it off and listen another time when you've got that little bit more strength to take on board. Because I want to give another suggestion that might be really useful. If you think about your week, my week, our week, as £1,000 from Sunday to Sunday, and I've got £1,000 in the bank. Now that £1,000 is going to cover all of Shlomi's meltdowns, all of his siblings, my financial struggle, my relationship, and just the regular, my job, my mundane day-to-day. Now that £1,000 has to cover me the whole week. If I reach Tuesday night and I'm suddenly realizing I'm hitting £950 and I've got £50 left to take me through the rest of the week, I have a problem. So to start to actually recognize what are we capable of, and somehow money has this real good way
it's a
of
good
making
example,
it real.
because I just feel like a lot of us would struggle with accepting that there's only £1,000, because maybe if I push harder there'll be another 1,000 and I'll,
But actually we are finite in terms of how much sleep we get, how much energy we have, and we need to be honest with ourselves about where we're at and what we can and can't do, and sometimes we need someone to talk that through with in order to have that recognition. And you can decide you've got £1 million in your bank. That's okay with me. But it's about how you spend your budget, no matter what your budget is. And, one mother said to me, just thinking about my children, that costs me so much. And she'd never realized that there was a price, so to speak, on just her thinking, her worrying. So, how about just taking that idea you're describing about Mum Mulky being worried about Shlomi's being from one day. How about if we just imagine how much is that going to cost, worrying about the whole future of his life in today's moment?
and what can we even do about it? What impact can we really have?
So just cutting that off and saying, right, that rumination never takes us anywhere positive. It never has for me anyway. And that idea that let's just cut that for now. Let me conserve my budget.
About the rumination, you're absolutely right. There's nothing I can do, but how do I stop a rumination? So I have a little trick. It's something I actually use a lot with people who are struggling to sleep at night and their heads going, all the thoughts, all the worries, and it can be used at any point in life. Our thinking, the way our mind works, is all based on words. We've got loads of words and they're just flying through our head at real speed. Which is why, as an aside, Zisi's idea of cycling through the senses is so calming, because it moves us away from all that thinking, all those words. And this works in a similar way. Because even though we have this tremendous number of thoughts going on in our head, we actually physically are only thinking one word at a time. So what we want to do is we want to create a traffic jam in our mind. So what I do is I think about a word that has no meaning. Because the problem is that almost all our language has meaning, and if I start thinking about one thing, it's going to lead me to think about another thing, it's going to lead me to think about another thing. Let me play a word association game with you, Laura.
I'm trying to think of a word without meaning, and I can't even think of one.
So if I say to you, Paris, what's the first thing you're going to think?
It's the capital of France.
Okay,
I've been there a few times.
Eiffel Tower. Everyone baguettes, you see? Now, some people will give me that in a different order, or they might say different things like kings, tricolor, revolution, anything. So what word do we have in the English language, and by the way, it's different in every language, that has no meaning? The word is the. What does the word the mean? It doesn't mean anything. It's a word we use to put sentences together and also to highlight something that we might want to say. So what we do is we use the word the to slow down the traffic in our mind. With every out breath, you say it. You take a breath in and you say the. In. The. And what happens is momentarily the thoughts are going to stop because they can't get through. After a while, if you do this every day for a minute or two, you can do it aloud. You can do it in your head. It still works. It's not quite as powerful, but it still works. After a while, your body is going to associate you repeating the word the with calming down. And you will notice that your breathing slows, your heart rate slows, and you're again able to reground yourself, find yourself, and get away from those really unhelpful thoughts.
Zehava, how often realistically would a person have to practice that in order to begin that association of the means I'm feeling relaxed?
It's a good question, and it depends on each person individually. It would take probably about a month, I think, if they do it once or twice a day.
Talking about association, you reminded me of something that Mrs. Dusty Adler from Gates said. She's a chinuch expert, and she told me about a study that was done where they split a room into 4 groups, and they gave them 5 different random words to memorize. And then once they memorized them, they were to walk to the front of the hall. And one of the groups, unbeknownly to them, was given the words Florida, wrinkle, age, coast, sunshine. And what was interesting and what's been proven again and again and again is that that group took double as long to come to the front of the stage as all the other groups, because all those words are associated with old age. And without even realizing it, the power of what we think and the power of how we speak to ourselves actually took the group double the length of time to get to the front.
That's unbelievable. And that kind of really brings together what we're talking about. Because what we're saying is Malki is in a situation that is not her fault. So there is no associated shame that should be involved. But because there is a feeling of shame, it is being exuded from her without any words. It's just being read on her. And that has a knock-on effect. But if Malki is able to come to a place within herself on a good day, in a quiet moment, where she realizes she's doing an amazing job and she's been given something really difficult that she is going through. She's not going over, she's not going under, she's going through it. So in that moment, she's able to ground herself. She's able to stay calm. So when Shlomi runs off because he's had a hard time, rather than running to the kitchen and crying because the situation seems so desperate, maybe in that moment, she will be able to feel just love for him and love for her siblings and turn to her husband and see whether they can work it out together.
Mm-hmm. And do you think that if Malki has the odd good day, that good day will generate another good day? And further on, there's another good day around the corner, which leads to more and more good days. And eventually she's going to be having mostly good days.
Well, we can't really guarantee that. But what we can say is that the idea of mayim ponim al ponim, the more positive you see, the more positive you experience. Even if Shlomi has meltdowns and other siblings have meltdowns, and even if things go wrong, when we can appreciate gratitude, being able to see the good, noting that makes such a difference to our entire existence. That's such a big one on its own.
If she accepts, she's halfway there. She's 3/4 of the way there, actually.
So we've spoken about that understanding, which maybe can lead to that acceptance.
Okay, shall we kick off the summary stage? Zisi, you had a particularly nice way of...
Oh, okay. So just going back to Shlomi and the family at home. Just thinking now before we sort of say goodbye today, I'm thinking what I'm taking home from this message. I love the idea of the. And I think it's very easy to talk about things. And just because I say them doesn't mean I do them all and I know them all. So I'm thinking about the compassion that I want to hold in mind for each of mine, the understanding for me to be able to keep an open mind about what's happening. I think that's what I'm taking. What about you, Laura?
I think what I'm taking home today is that really strong message that there is no reason to feel any shame for having neurodiverse children. And somehow I need to find a way through to accept that and accept my children, accept my situation, accept that I'm not in control. And if I manage to accept these things in a real way, then I will just be so much happier and more comfortable within myself, knowing that I'm not controlling what's happening in my home. I actually play a very small part in what happens in my home.
Yeah, I like that. And I think for me, it's the story of Malki and her family evoked such a emotion, such a desire to just give everyone a hug. And I'm thinking about what you said, Zisi. This is not about me. This is not about what I've done wrong. So actually, in that moment, I can say, okay, what do you need? What do I need? What does he need? What does she need? And act accordingly.
I hope that, if nothing else, we've managed to show the listeners that they're not alone in these parenting struggles, and that you can give yourself permission to be a little bit kinder to yourself. And that when we look after ourselves and invest in ourselves, that investment trickles through to our children. They benefit too because they'll have stronger, happier parents. We've covered so much. I hope that in future we'll be able to revisit some of these ideas and maybe explore them further. Thank you so much for joining us today. Wishing all of you renewed strength and positivity on your parenting journey, and have a great day. Hand in Hand is a unique social care volunteering organisation assisting families who aren't coping with their life circumstances. We provide personalised support for families that meet any of our 5 criteria: mental health, single parent, children with additional needs, pre- or postnatal complications, and other extenuating circumstances. If you live in North West London or Manchester and would be interested in discussing your eligibility, find us online at www.hih.org.uk.